The crimson sky of Korthak Prime wept ash as War Chief Graxus Ironjaw surveyed the smoldering ruins that had once been the proud stronghold of Clan Drakmor. Where mighty stone towers had pierced the perpetual twilight just 3 days ago, now only twisted metal and melted rock remained. The acrid smell of vaporized flesh hung heavy in the air, mixing with the sulphurous tang that always accompanied the arrival of the Void Reapers. Graxus spat into the blackened soil, his massive tusks gleaming in the firelight of still-burning debris. At nearly 8 feet tall and weighing close to 400 pounds of muscle and bone, the war chief of Clan Blood Fawn was an imposing figure even among his own kind. Scars crisscrossed his emerald hide like a road map of countless battles, each one earned in honorable combat against rival clans or the native predators of their harsh world. But these new scars, the ones that would never heal, those came from watching his people die in ways that violated every tradition of warfare the Orcs had known for millennia. Another clan burns, rumbled Korath Skullcrusher, Graxus's most trusted lieutenant. The grizzled Orc veteran's voice carried the weight of witnessing 3 such massacres in as many weeks. The Void Reapers show no mercy, no honor. They do not even take prisoners for their slave pits. Graxus nodded grimly as he knelt beside a peculiar crystalline residue that marked where a Drakmor warrior had made his final stand. The substance pulsed with an otherworldly purple light, a signature of the aliens' terrifying weapons that didn't just kill, but completely atomized their targets. Not even ashes remained for proper funeral rites. They seek total extinction, Graxus growled, his deep voice carrying across the wasteland to his assembled war party. 50 of Clan Bloodfang's finest warriors stood in formation behind him, their traditional bone armor supplemented now with salvaged alien technology from previous encounters. First Clan Stormclaw fell to their orbital bombardment. Then Clan Ironhide was consumed by their ground assault. Yesterday, Clan Nightwolf simply vanished. Not even ruins left behind. Korath hefted his massive warhammer, its head inscribed with the flowing script of the old tongue. And now Drakmor joins the fallen. War Chief, we cannot face this threat alone. Clan Bloodfawn is mighty, but we are not gods, Graxus finished. He rose to his full height, surveying his warriors with eyes that burned like molten amber. Pride has ever been the weakness of our kind. Each clan believing itself superior, fighting endless wars while the true enemy watches from the void. A younger warrior, Urgashbone Nor, stepped forward. Despite his youth, he bore the ritual scars of a veteran raider and commanded a significant portion of Bloodfang's shock troops. War Chief, you speak as if there are others left to ally with. 4 clans lie dead. Who remains but us and Clan Shadowtusk? Graxus interrupted, the name leaving his lips like a curse. Our blood enemies. The ones who have contested our dominion of the Eastern Territories for over 2 centuries. The mention of their ancient rivals sent a ripple of anger through the assembled warriors. Clan Bloodfang and Clan Shadowtusk had been locked in perpetual warfare since before most of them were born. Their conflicts were legendary, spawning songs and sagas that echoed through the great halls of both clans. The very idea of alliance with Shadowtusk was tantamount to suggesting they mate with the acid-spitting tunnel worms of the deep caverns. Better to die with honor than live in shame, snarled Gorak the Flayer, one of Graxus's war captains. The Shadowtusk dogs are weak, led by that coward Malakar. They hide in their mountain fortress while real warriors face the enemy. Graxus whirled on his captain with such sudden fury that several warriors instinctively reached for their weapons. When the warchief spoke, his voice carried the authority of one who had led Clan Bloodfang to victory in over 100 battles. You forget yourself, Gorak. Malakar Doomcaller may be our enemy, but he is no coward. His clan has held the Thorns Pine Mountains for 3 centuries against every force that has tried to claim them. Their fortress of Obsidian Gate has never fallen, not to us, not to the metal beasts of the northern wastes, not to any who dared challenge them. He turned to address the entire war party, his voice carrying across the ruins with practiced command. We face extinction, my brothers. Not defeat, extinction. The Void Reapers do not seek to conquer us or enslave us. They seek to erase us from existence as completely as if we had never drawn breath. In the face of such an enemy, old feuds become the luxury of the living. Korath stroked his braided beard, understanding dawning in his battle-scarred features. You mean to seek alliance with Shadowtusk? I mean to survive, Graxus replied simply. And for our people to survive, we must swallow our pride and unite with the only other clan strong enough to stand against these invaders. Alone, we are merely the next victims. Together, he gestured toward the strange crystalline residue at their feet. Together, we might actually have a chance to make these alien butchers bleed. A new voice interrupted the discussion, a harsh cry from one of the scouts posted on the perimeter. War Chief! Contacts approaching from the north. Unknown configuration! Graxus and his war party immediately shifted into combat formation, weapons appearing in massive hands with practiced ease. The orc warriors spread out among the ruins, using the twisted metal and shattered stone for cover as they prepared for battle. The scout who had given the warning, a lean female named Zara Swiftstrike, came bounding over the rubble with the fluid grace of her kind. Her dark green skin was painted with the traditional red war stripes of a long-range reconnaissance specialist, and her keen eyes missed nothing as she approached. Report, Graxus commanded tersely. 3 contacts, moving fast from the northern approach. Not Void Reapers. The energy signatures are all wrong. Configuration suggests Orc technology, but modified. Zara's expression was troubled. War Chief, I think it's an embassy party. Flying the war banner of Clan Shadowtusk. A collective intake of breath came from the assembled warriors. For Shadowtusk to approach under a war banner rather than a peace banner suggested either an imminent challenge to combat or something else entirely. It seems, Graxus said with grim amusement, that great minds think alike? Malachar has reached the same conclusion we have. He signaled for his warriors to maintain their positions but hold their fire. Let's see what the old devil wants. The approaching vehicles resolved into view as they crested a ridge of melted stone. 3 heavily armored war bikes, their engines modified with alien technology that gave them an eerie blue glow. Each bike carried a single rider, and even at a distance, the distinctive black and silver armor of Clan Shadowtusk was unmistakable. The lead rider brought his bike to a halt just outside optimal combat range, close enough to speak, far enough to escape if negotiations went poorly. With fluid grace, the figure dismounted and removed the ornate skull helmet that was traditional among Shadowtusk nobility. Even Graxus felt a momentary shock at the identity of the envoy. This was no mere war captain or lieutenant, but Norgrim Blackthorn, second son of War Chief Malachar and heir apparent to Clan Shadowtusk's leadership. For him to come personally spoke volumes about the desperation of their situation. Norgrim was slightly smaller than Graxus but carried himself with the fluid deadliness of a master warrior. His skin was the deeper green-black coloration common to mountain orcs, and ritual scarification covered his arms and face in intricate patterns that told the story of his victories. When he spoke, his voice carried clearly across the wasteland. Graxus Ironjaw, War Chief of Clan Bloodfang, I come under the ancient laws of parley. Will you hear the words of my father, Malachar Doomcaller? For a long moment, the 2 groups of warriors stared at each other across the ruins. 2 centuries of bloodshed and hatred lay between them, generations of war that had claimed thousands of lives on both sides. But above them all, the alien sky wept ash from the newest grave of their people. Graxus stepped forward, close enough that both groups could hear him clearly. I will hear these words, Norgrim Blackthorn. Speak the will of your father. The Shadowtusk prince reached into his armor and produced a scroll case carved from dragon bone, a formal diplomatic communication of the highest order. As he unrolled the parchment, his voice took on the ritual cadence used for official clan pronouncements. To Graxus Ironjaw, War Chief of Clan Bloodfang, Terror of the Eastern Plains, Slayer of the Great Wyrm Corvithus, from Malachar Doomcaller, War Chief of Clan Shadowtusk, Guardian of the Thorn's Pine, Keeper of the Obsidian Gate, Lord of the Mountain Fastness. The stars weep fire, and our world burns beneath alien fury. 3 clans lie dead, their warriors reduced to glowing dust, their strongholds cast down like children's toys. The enemy that destroys them cares nothing for our strength, our honor, or our ancient ways. They come to make of Korthak Prime a dead rock spinning in the void. For 200 years our clans have warred. For 200 years we have tested our strength against each other, growing ever more mighty in the crucible of conflict. Now that strength must be turned against a common foe, or it will die with us in the ruins of our pride. I propose an alliance, Graxus Ironjaw. Not surrender, not submission, but alliance between equals. Our clans united, our warriors fighting as one, our knowledge and resources shared against the Void Reapers who would unmake us all. If you would hear this proposal in full, come to the Thorns Pine Mountains. Come to Obsidian Gate, and let us speak as war chiefs, not as enemies. The ancient protocols of truce meeting will be observed. You and a guard of your choosing will have safe passage and protection under the sacred laws. Time grows short, blood of my blood's enemy. Choose swiftly, choose wisely, or choose not at all. But know that when the alien ships descend upon your fortress as they descended upon Drakmor, you will face them alone. Norgrim rolled up the scroll and waited, his dark eyes never leaving Graxus's face. The Blood-Fawn warriors muttered among themselves, some angered by what they saw as arrogance from their hereditary foes, others recognizing the wisdom in the proposal. Graxus considered carefully. Malachar was cunning, perhaps the most cunning war chief on all of Korthak Prime. This could be an elaborate trap, a way to eliminate Clan Bloodfang's leadership and claim dominion over their territory. But the alternative was to face the Void Reapers alone, and Graxus had seen what that meant for the other clans. Tell your father, he said finally, that I will come to Obsidian Gate. Tomorrow at dawn, I will depart with my chosen guard. And Norgrim. The Shadow-Tusk Prince looked up expectantly. Tell him that if this is a trap, if he thinks to use the alien threat as cover for treachery, I will personally feed his entrails to the mountain vultures before I die. Norgrim actually smiled at that, a fierce expression that showed his own impressive tusks. He would expect no less, Graxus Ironjaw. And he bade me tell you this, that if you attempt treachery against us, my mother will make wind chimes from your bones. The smile widened. She's quite artistic, from what I'm told. Despite everything, despite the gravity of their situation and the centuries of hatred between their clans, Graxus found himself laughing, a deep, booming sound that echoed off the ruins around them. Perhaps, just perhaps, this alliance might actually work. As Norgrim and his escort mounted their war bikes and departed into the growing dusk, Graxus turned to his assembled warriors. The time for hatred was ending. The time for survival was about to begin. The journey to the Thorns Pine Mountains took Graxus and his chosen guard through some of the most dangerous territory on Korthak Prime. The Badlands between Blood-Fawn and Shadow-Tusk territories were home to massive predators, unstable geological formations, and the occasional remnant of ancient Orc civilizations that had fallen to their own wars millennia ago. Graxus had selected his escort carefully. Along with the ever-present Koros Skullcrusher, he brought Urgash Bongnor for his tactical acumen, Zara Swiftstrike for her reconnaissance skills, and Thrak the Wise, an elderly shaman who served as keeper of clan lore and traditions. If this alliance was to work, they would need wisdom as much as strength. Their war machines roared across the broken landscape, 6 heavily armed vehicles that could serve as either transportation or mobile fighting platforms. Like many Orc technologies, they appeared crude but were devastatingly effective, fusion engines wrapped in armor plating, bristling with weapons systems both traditional and salvaged from their enemies. As they climbed the winding mountain passes that led to Shadow-Tusk territory, Graxus found his thoughts turning to the intelligence reports they had gathered about their mysterious enemy. The Void Reapers, a name given to them by the Orcs who had witnessed their attacks, seemed to follow no recognizable pattern of conquest or colonization. They didn't seek to occupy territory, harvest resources, or enslave populations. They simply arrived, methodically destroyed everything they found, and moved on. Their technology was generations ahead of anything the Orcs possessed, but they used it with a cold efficiency that suggested total indifference to their victims. War Chief! Urgash's voice crackled over the comm system, interrupting his brooding. We're approaching the outer perimeter of Shadowtusk defenses. I'm reading energy signatures consistent with their Guardian systems. Through the armored viewports of his command vehicle, Graxus could see the legendary defenses of Clan Shadowtusk beginning to reveal themselves. The Thorns Pine Mountains were a natural fortress, with steep cliffs and narrow passes that could be easily defended. But the Shadowtusk engineers had spent centuries improving on nature's design. Hidden weapon emplacements emerged from what had appeared to be natural rock formations. Energy barriers shimmered across key choke points, capable of stopping everything from small arms fire to orbital bombardment. Motion sensors and automated defensive systems tracked their approach with mechanical precision. Impressive, Korath admitted grudgingly over the calm. No wonder we never managed to take this place by storm. Thrak the Wise, riding in the rear escort vehicle, added his own perspective. The mountain clans have always been builders and engineers. Where we blood fawn excel in mobile warfare and shock attacks, they perfect the arts of defense and siege warfare. Their fortress cities are legendary throughout the Orc territories. A new voice joined the communication channel, crisp, authoritative, and unmistakably Shadowtusk. Bloodfawn Convo, this is Obsidian Gate Command. You are entering restricted airspace. Maintain current heading and velocity. Deviation from the prescribed route will result in immediate defensive action. Friendly as ever, Zara muttered. But Graxus was studying the defenses with a professional eye, and what he saw both impressed and worried him. The Shadowtusk fortifications were indeed formidable, but they were designed to repel conventional attacks by ground forces or aircraft. Against the kind of orbital bombardment that had destroyed Clan Stormclaw, even these mighty walls might not be enough. The convoy wound its way through a series of checkpoints, each one more elaborate than the last. At each stop, Shadowtusk guards in their distinctive black and silver armor verified their identities and examined their vehicles for weapons or hidden threats. The process was thorough but respectful. They were treating the Bloodfawn delegation as honored guests rather than prisoners. Finally, they rounded a curve in the mountain road and saw their destination, Obsidian Gate itself. The fortress was a marvel of Orc engineering, carved directly into the living rock of the mountain peak. Massive walls of black stone rose hundreds of feet into the air, topped with weapon emplacements, and crowned with the banners of Clan Shadowtusk. The main gate was indeed made of polished obsidian, its dark surface reflecting the light of the setting sun like a mirror. But it was the city beyond the walls that truly took Graxus's breath away. Where Clan Bloodfawn lived in mobile camps and temporary structures, always ready to move to new hunting grounds or raid targets, Clan Shadowtusk had built a permanent city that rivaled anything in Orc history. Tall spires rose from terrace levels carved into the mountainside, connected by bridges and platforms that defied gravity itself. Gardens and forges, temples and armories, all integrated into a single unified structure that seemed to grow naturally from the mountain's bones. This was not just a fortress, it was a civilization unto itself, capable of supporting hundreds of thousands of Orcs and their families for generations. By the tusks of the ancestors, Urgash whispered over the calm. I never imagined. None of us did, Graxus replied quietly. We thought them barbarians hiding in the mountains. We never realized they were building this. Their convoy passed through the obsidian gates and into a vast courtyard where hundreds of Shadowtusk warriors had assembled in honor formation. These were not the crude raiders that Bloodfawn warriors had faced in border skirmishes, but professional soldiers in full ceremonial armor, their weapons and equipment maintained to perfection. At the center of the formation stood a figure that Graxus recognized immediately, though they had never met face to face. Melekar Doomcaller, war chief of Clan Shadowtusk, was slightly smaller than Graxus but radiated an aura of controlled power that was immediately apparent. His armor was a masterwork of Orc metallurgy, black steel inscribed with silver runes that seemed to shift and flow in the light. But it was his eyes that caught Graxus's attention, intelligent, calculating, and completely without fear. This was not a war chief who led from the rear or relied on subordinates to do his fighting. This was a warrior king who had earned his position through strength and cunning in equal measure. The Blood Fawn delegation dismounted from their vehicles and formed up in their own ceremonial formation. For a long moment, the two groups faced each other across the courtyard, representatives of clans that had shed each other's blood for 2 centuries. Then Malachar stepped forward and spoke, his voice carrying clearly across the assembled warriors. Graxus Ironjaw, War Chief of Clan Bloodfang, you honor us with your presence. Welcome to Obsidian Gate, Sanctuary of Clan Shadowtusk, Guardian of the Thorn's Pine, bulwark against the darkness that comes from beyond the stars. Graxus responded with equal formality. Malachar Ducaller, War Chief of Clan Shadowtusk, I accept your hospitality in the ancient spirit of truce meeting. Let our words here be heard by the ancestors, and let our deeds honor the memory of all who have fallen. The ritual exchange complete, both war chiefs relaxed slightly. Malachar gestured toward the main keep of the fortress. Come! We have much to discuss, and time grows short. My scouts report that the Void Reapers have begun moving their fleet assets toward the inner system. We have perhaps days before they arrive in force. As they walked through the corridors of Obsidian Gate, Graxus was struck by the differences between Shadowtusk and Bloodfawn cultures. Where his own people decorated their halls with weapons and trophies of the hunt, the Shadowtusk preferred murals and sculptures that told the story of their clan's history. Ancient battles were depicted in flowing stone reliefs, showing orc warriors standing together against various threats over the centuries. Your fortress is impressive, Graxus said as they climbed a spiral staircase toward the upper levels. I begin to understand why our raids against your territory always failed so miserably. Malachar allowed himself a slight smile. Just as I understand why our attempts to invade your territory always ended with our forces scattered to the winds. Mobility versus fortification, we have been perfectly matched enemies. They entered a large chamber that Graxus realized was Malachar's war room, the nerve center from which Clan Shadowtusk planned and coordinated their military operations. The walls were covered with maps, tactical displays, and communication equipment that would not have been out of place in the command center of a galactic military force. But it was the three-dimensional holographic display in the center of the room that drew Graxus's attention. It showed Korthak Prime in perfect detail, with markers indicating the locations of all 5 major clan territories. 3 of those markers pulsed red, Stormclaw, Ironhide, and Nightwolf, marking the fallen clans. Drakmor's marker flickered between red and black, indicating its recent destruction. Our intelligence network is more extensive than you might imagine, Malachar said, noting Graxus's interest in the display. We have monitoring stations throughout the planet, some dating back centuries. They've been tracking the Void Reaper fleet since it first entered our system. He manipulated controls on the display, and the view expanded to show the space around Korthak Prime. Dozens of red contacts moved through the void, their trajectories clearly aimed at the planet. Each contact was massive, kilometers long and bristling with weapon systems that defied easy classification. 47 major vessels, Malachar continued, plus countless smaller craft. Their total firepower is sufficient to crack continents. Against such a force, traditional orc warfare is useless. We cannot meet them in open battle and hope to survive. Graxus studied the display, his strategic mind already working on the problem. But you have a plan. You wouldn't have called for this alliance if you didn't think we had a chance. I have the beginnings of a plan, Malachar corrected. But it requires resources and capabilities that neither of our clans possesses alone. Tell me, Graxus, what do you know of the ancient ruins in the northern wastes? The question caught Graxus off guard. The northern wastes were a desolate region beyond the territories of any clan, home to the remnants of civilizations that had fallen long before the current clans rose to power. Most orcs avoided the area, believing it to be cursed or haunted by the spirits of the dead. Little, Graxus admitted. My people avoid the dead lands. There's nothing there but ruins and radiation. Precisely, Malachar said with satisfaction. Nothing there but ruins, and the most advanced weapons systems ever developed by our people. The clans that built those cities weren't destroyed by war or disaster. They transcended, ascending to a higher plane of existence and leaving their works behind. He manipulated the display again, zooming in on the northern wastes. Hidden among the rugged terrain, Graxus could see the outline of structures that dwarfed even Obsidian Gate. Ancient cities that stretched for miles, their architecture unlike anything built by modern orc clans. "I've spent decades studying the ruins," Malachar continued. "My scholars and engineers have mapped most of the major sites. What we've found there. Graxus, our ancestors possessed technology that makes our current weapons look like stone clubs. Orbital defense platforms, energy shields that could stop planetary bombardments, weapons capable of destroying entire fleets." Graxus felt a chill run down his spine. "If such weapons exist, why haven't you used them against us? Why haven't you claimed dominion over all the clans?" "Because I couldn't activate them," Malachar replied simply. "The ancient systems require biometric authorization from multiple orc bloodlines, a safeguard to prevent any single clan from dominating all others. But with representatives of both our bloodlines working together." Understanding dawned in Graxus's mind. "You need both clans to activate the ancient defenses." "Exactly. Clan Shadowtusk possesses the knowledge and the technical expertise to operate the systems. Clan Bloodfang possesses one of the few bloodlines that the ancient computers will accept as valid authorization. Together, we can awaken weapons that have slept for millennia." "And if we can't?" Graxus asked, though he already knew the answer. "Then we die," Malachar said matter-of-factly. "The Void Reapers will exterminate us just as they exterminated the others. Our clans will become footnotes in galactic history, remembered only as another species that failed to adapt to a changing universe." A new voice interrupted their discussion, Norgrim Blackthorn, who had been standing silently near the wall. "Father, the outer sensors are detecting increased activity in the enemy fleet. They're beginning to establish orbital positions." Malachar nodded grimly. "Then our time for debate has ended. Graxus, I need your answer now. Will Clan Bloodfang join with Clan Shadowtusk in this desperate gambit? Will you risk everything on the hope that our ancestors' weapons can save us?" Graxus looked around the war room, taking in the faces of both Shadowtusk and Bloodfang personnel. These orcs, his enemies for so many years, were now offering to share their most precious secrets, to trust their lives to an alliance that would have been unthinkable just days ago. But the alternative was extinction. Not defeat, not occupation, but complete annihilation. The Void Reapers had made their intentions clear with the destruction of 3 clans. There would be no mercy, no quarter, no hope of survival except through unity. "I will need to consult with my advisors," Graxus said formally. "And I will need guarantees that this alliance will be honored regardless of the outcome of our current crisis." "Of course," Malachar replied. "Take all the time you need. But remember, every hour we delay is an hour closer to orbital bombardment." As if summoned by his words, an alarm began sounding throughout the fortress. Emergency lights bathed the war room in red, and technicians rushed to their stations as new data flooded the tactical displays. "Report!" Malachar commanded. A Shadowtusk communications officer looked up from his console, his face pale with fear. "War Chief, we're detecting energy signatures consistent with Void Reaper attack patterns. Something big is happening in the southern territories." The holographic display shifted to show the region where Clan Bloodfang's main fortress lay. As they watched, new red markers appeared and began moving toward the Bloodfang stronghold with inexorable purpose. "They're attacking my home," Graxus said quietly, his hands clenching into fists. "My people are dying while I stand here talking." Malachar placed a hand on his shoulder, a gesture that would have meant instant combat just days ago. "Then we had better make this alliance work, hadn't we? Because if we fail, there won't be anyone left to remember their sacrifice." Graxus looked one more time at the display showing the approaching doom of his clan, then turned to face his ancient enemy with newfound resolve. "You have your alliance, Malachar Doomcaller. Let us go wake the ancestors' wrath." The combined war party that set out from Obsidian Gate the next morning was unlike anything seen on Korthak Prime in living memory. 50 of Clan Shadowtusk's finest warriors rode alongside 50 from Clan Bloodfang, their traditional animosity set aside in the face of a greater threat. The sight of their mixed banners flying together sent shockwaves through both clans. Some hailed it as the beginning of a new age, others whispered of betrayal and dishonor. Graxus rode in the lead vehicle alongside Malachar, both war chiefs studying the route to the northern wastes on a tactical display. Behind them, their combined forces represented the finest military hardware either clan possessed: heavy assault vehicles, mobile artillery platforms, and support craft bristling with weapons both traditional and experimental. The main complex we're seeking is called Kareth Mor in the Old Tongue, Malachar explained as their convoy navigated the treacherous mountain passes leading north. The Citadel of Stars. According to the ancient records, it was the primary military command center for the entire northern continent during the last Great War. What were they fighting? Graxus asked, studying the maps with a tactician's eye. The ruins suggest a civilization far more advanced than anything we've achieved. What could have threatened them so badly that they needed such weapons? Malachar's expression darkened. That's what worries me. The records speak of an enemy from beyond the stars, invaders who sought not conquest but complete extermination. The descriptions are remarkably similar to what we're facing now. The implications of that statement hung heavy in the air between them. If the Void Reapers were the same species that had threatened Korthak Prime millennia ago, then their current invasion was not opportunistic but methodical, a return to finish what they had started long ago. War Chief, came a voice from the communications system. Zara Swiftstrike, ranging ahead of the main convoy on her scout bike, was reporting from the perimeter. I'm detecting massive energy readings from the north. Whatever's up there, it's not completely dead. Through the viewports of their command vehicle, Graxus could see the landscape beginning to change as they entered the northern wastes. The familiar red soil and hardy vegetation of the southern territories gave way to something more alien, crystalline formations that jutted from the earth like frozen lightning, and a persistent background radiation that made their instruments hum with electronic interference. But it was the ruins themselves that truly captured their attention. As they crested a ridge overlooking the main complex, both war chiefs fell silent at the sight before them. Kareth Mor stretched across the horizon like a metallic mountain range, its towers and spires reaching toward the sky with impossible grace. Despite millennia of abandonment, the city showed little sign of decay. Whatever materials the ancients had used in its construction seemed to actively resist the passage of time. At the center of the complex, a massive pyramid-like structure rose from the surrounding buildings like a geometric mountain. Energy patterns played across its surface in slowly shifting configurations, suggesting that whatever power source it relied upon was still functional after all these ages. By the ancestors, Urgash breathed over the comm system. It's beautiful. It's terrifying, Korath corrected. What kind of power could keep those lights burning for thousands of years? As they approached the outskirts of the ancient city, Graxus noticed that their vehicle's instruments were registering increasingly strange readings. The very air seemed to thrum with residual energy, and occasionally they caught glimpses of movement in the ruins, not life as they understood it, but something else entirely. The city's automated systems are still partially active, Malachar explained as he guided their convoy through streets wide enough to accommodate vehicles 10 times larger than their own. Maintenance drones, security protocols, environmental controls, all functioning according to programming established before our current clans even existed. They passed structures whose purpose could only be guessed at, vast halls filled with incomprehensible machinery, towers that crackled with barely contained energy, and gardens where crystalline trees grew in perfect geometric patterns. Everything was built on a scale that dwarfed modern Orc architecture, suggesting that their ancestors had been not just more advanced, but physically larger as well. There, Malachar said, pointing toward the central pyramid. The command center. If anywhere contains the weapons we need, it will be there. As their convoy approached the base of the pyramid, Graxus noticed something that made his tactical instincts scream warnings. The area around the structure was completely clear of debris or vegetation, as if something had been keeping it clean. And the energy patterns on the pyramid's surface were growing brighter and more active as they drew near. Malachar, he said slowly, I think the city knows we're here. Before the Shadow Tusk war chief could respond, their vehicle's communications systems suddenly came alive with a voice that seemed to emanate from the very air around them. The words were in the old tongue, the ancient form of Orcish that was now used only for religious ceremonies and formal occasions. Genetic markers detected. Authorization required for system access. Identify yourselves, children of the lost clans. Both war chiefs exchanged glances. Whatever they had expected to find in the ruins, a functioning artificial intelligence had not been high on the list. Malachar was the first to respond, speaking carefully in the old tongue. I am Malachar of the Shadow Tusk lineage, guardian of mountain and stone. I seek the weapons of our ancestors to defend against the darkness from beyond. Shadow Tusk lineage recognized. Partial authorization granted. Secondary authorization required. All eyes turned to Graxus. Taking a deep breath, he spoke in the formal cadence required by ancient protocols. I am Graxus of the Bloodfawn lineage, hunter of plain and forest. I stand with my brother in the face of extinction. Bloodfang lineage recognized. Full authorization achieved. Welcome to Kareth Moor, last garrison of the Star Guard. Your arrival was anticipated. The ground beneath their vehicles began to shift and flow like liquid metal. With remarkable precision, the city's systems raised their convoy on platforms that carried them up the side of the pyramid to a landing platform near its apex. As they disembarked, Graxus felt the weight of millennia pressing down on him. The entrance to the command center was guarded by massive doors inscribed with scenes of ancient battles. As they approached, the doors swung open with silent grace, revealing corridors that seemed to stretch beyond the physical limitations of the structure they had entered. Spatial folding technology, Malachar explained, noting Graxus's confusion. The interior dimensions don't match the exterior ones. This facility is much larger than it appears from outside. They were led by holographic guides, translucent figures in ancient armor who walked ahead of them through corridors lined with displays and control panels. As they passed, the displays came alive with tactical information, star charts, and weapon schematics that hurt to look at directly. Finally, they arrived at the central command chamber, a vast spherical room whose walls were covered with three-dimensional displays showing everything from planetary defense grids to star maps covering half the galaxy. At the center of the room, a column of pure light extended from floor to ceiling, pulsing with information that seemed to flow like liquid intelligence. Please state the nature of the threat you face, the voice said, emanating from all around them. Malachar stepped forward and began to speak, describing the arrival of the Void Reaper fleet and the systematic destruction of the Orc clans. As he talked, the displays around them shifted to show tactical analyses of the alien ships, their weapons, and their probable strategy. When he finished, silence filled the chamber for several long moments. Then the AI spoke again, and for the first time, its voice carried something that might have been emotion. The Devourers have returned. We had believed that our sacrifice had ended their threat permanently. It seems we merely delayed the inevitable. You fought them before, Graxus said. It wasn't a question. For centuries. They came from the void between galaxies, seeking not to conquer but to consume. Entire worlds fell to their hunger, their populations reduced to energy to feed their ships. We developed weapons capable of stopping them, at great cost. The displays shifted to show images of the ancient war, fleets of Orc ships engaging vast alien vessels in the darkness of space, planets protected by energy shields that could withstand the fury of stars, and weapons that could crack moons and scatter asteroids like dust. In the end, we succeeded in driving them back to the void. But the effort required. It consumed our civilization. The survivors chose to transcend physical existence rather than rebuild from nothing. They left these systems as a legacy, hoping that future generations would never need them. But we do need them, Malachar said urgently. Can you activate the planetary defenses? Can you give us the weapons to fight back? The orbital defense platforms were destroyed in the final battle. The great ships of the Star Guard lie broken in the outer system. But the planetary weapons remain functional. They can be activated. Hope flared in Graxus's chest, but the AI's next words dampened it immediately. However, the power requirements are enormous. To activate the full defense grid would require the life force of approximately 1 million sentient beings. The ancient warriors made this sacrifice willingly, knowing that their deaths would power the weapons that saved their world. The chamber fell silent as the implication sank in. To save their people, they would have to sacrifice their people. It was a paradox that offered no easy answers. There has to be another way, Urgash said, speaking for the first time since they had entered the complex. Some alternative that doesn't require genocide. There is one possibility, the AI admitted after a pause. The weapons can be powered by alternative energy sources, but the process is unreliable. Failure would result in the destruction of this facility, and everything within a 1,000-kilometer radius. Graxus and Malachar exchanged glances. The choice was becoming clear: certain extinction or a desperate gamble that might save them all or destroy them in the attempt. What kind of alternative power source? Malachar asked. The planetary core. By tapping directly into the molten heart of Korthak Prime, sufficient energy could be generated to power the weapons. However, the process would destabilize the planet's geological structure. Seismic activity would increase dramatically, volcanic activity would resume across multiple continents, and the planetary climate would be permanently altered. But we would survive, Graxus said slowly. Some of you would survive. Casualties would be significant. Before either war chief could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the facility. The displays shifted to show new tactical information. The Void Reaper fleet had completed its orbital deployment and was beginning to descend toward the planet's surface. Immediate decision required, the AI announced with mechanical urgency. The Devourers have begun their final assault. Time to deployment, approximately 6 hours. Graxus looked around the chamber at the assembled warriors from both clans. These orcs had followed their leaders into the most dangerous place on their world, trusting in their judgment and their courage. Now that trust would be tested in the ultimate way. If we do nothing, he said to Malachar, we all die anyway. At least this way, some of our people might survive. Malachar nodded grimly. The alternative is extinction. I vote for the gamble. Together, the two war chiefs turned to face the AI's central column. Do it, Graxus commanded. Activate the ancient weapons. Whatever the cost, whatever the consequences, we choose to fight. Acknowledged. Initiating core tap sequence. All personnel should evacuate to minimum safe distance. The ancestors preserve you all. As they ran for their vehicles, the ancient city of Kareth Mor began to awaken fully for the first time in millennia. Deep beneath their feet, massive machinery stirred to life, beginning the process that would either save their world or destroy it. The last battle for Korthak Prime was about to begin.